Alright, so this is for the Unit 3 test review over the United States and Canada. Alright, just like the last two tests, there's going to be several questions that have quotes, or graphs, charts, maps, things like that you'll use to answer the question, all of which require some previous knowledge, but are still fairly easy. And you'll also see questions from previous units to make sure that you know the information from other units, since that will carry over not only to the STAR test but also to the midterm in this class. Alright, so first off, make sure you know the difference between Canada and its government system and ours. So some simple things. First off, we're both democracies, but the difference is they have a parliament. In the parliamentary system, the executive and legislative branches are tied together because the prime minister is part of the parliament, and the people in Canada do not directly elect the prime minister. They elect people in parliament, and then the party that wins majority in parliament, their leader becomes the prime minister automatically. Whereas in here in the U.S. we have three branches. They're all separate, and the president is more or less directly elected by the people. You know what a representative democracy is, which is government like ours, where the people elect your representatives that then vote on the laws. And you know why the U.S. is such a strong economic power. There's a few main reasons on that. First off, natural resources. We have tons of natural resources, both here and in Canada. We also have a stable political system, and we have a skilled working class, so high education. And again, without all those three, you're not going to have a strong economy. You can have all the natural resources, but if you don't have a stable government, it's not going to do so well. You know in general where the Rocky Mountains are, which they're on the western side of the U.S., starting in northern New Mexico through Colorado, Wyoming, all the way up into Canada, all the way up towards Alaska. From last unit, you need to remember the different levels of economic activity: the primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. So, know, for example, like farming, like what activity level would that be? Also know where the Great Plains are, which are just west of here, so as you head towards the Lubbock, and then all the way up through Canada. So it goes all the way up through Panhandle, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, North South Dakota, all the way up into Saskatchewan. And of course that's where you see a lot of farming. Need to know about pull factors, what pulls people into the United States. Obviously that's going to be jobs, education, higher pay, and then obviously freedom is going to be another big one. And then another one from last unit, need to know generally where people are going to settle and live, where you're going to see the biggest area of population density, and that's going to be obviously along rivers, the coastline, and generally flat areas. That's where you see most of the people in the U.S. On the Columbian Exchange, make sure you know what was exchanged between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. So for example, like from Europe, we gain things like livestock such as cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, all that. Obviously diseases, all types of diseases. And then from the Americas over to Europe and to Africa, they received things like tobacco, cocoa, and different crops like corn and potatoes and things of that sort. Or urban sprawl, and you know what urban sprawl is, and that's where you have growth in a certain area very quickly. So people are moving in very quickly to the point to where they don't plan the development. They don't plan how the city is going to be built out. And so you got a lot of growth going on without any planning. Okay, I already went over that part with you. Make sure you know the correlation between the income of a country, like the income that individuals would make in a country, compared to the literacy rate of that country. So the higher the literacy rate, the higher the income is going to be, because obviously they can hold jobs that require more education, whereas if most people can't read, obviously they're not going to do much, because think about all the things you can do without being able to read. It's not much. You can lift things, and you can do manual labor, that kind of thing, but you're not going to be able to do anything that requires reading if you don't know how. And the climate for the U.S. and Canada as a whole is very diverse. Obviously, you got tundra in the northern part of Canada as you reach the North Pole, and then obviously you have warm, humid climate. We've got swamps, savanna type land, pretty much everything except jungles, unless you count Central America. But we're not talking about that right now. All right, need to know why the Appalachians are older than the Rockies, or at least how you can tell, really. And you can tell from their height, the Appalachians are much smoother and they're much smaller because they were worn down by the Ice Age, whereas in the Rockies are much younger and therefore taller and jagged. See here. You know why our economy has grown so much in the past 50 years, and that obviously has to do with us switching over more to the service industry. We have a free market economy, which allows more opportunities for people to start businesses, and of course a stable political system. And then Canada culturally is referred to as mosaic because they have these different cultures that fit together, but they don't blend together. And so you got the French, the British, the natives, and the Métis, which is a mix of native and white. And they all stay pretty separate, like the French stay in Quebec. The natives are in Nunavut. So they don't mix together as much as you see the cultures here in the United States intertwine. Alright, right now you need to know... Sorry about the sneeze. You need to know, as far as people that immigrate to the United States right now, which is the largest group, which is obviously Hispanics. They're the largest group now. Now, back 100 years ago, the largest group immigrating to the U.S. was Europeans. So now it's Hispanics. Used to 100 years ago as Europeans. You need to know about the St. Lawrence Seaway, which the Erie Canal connects to that. I showed you all that. It's in the PowerPoint, the slide where you see what shows the Erie Canal, like a diagram of it, and the ships, how the locks work. Moving the ships up the canal and then down. But most importantly, you need to know why they built that. And that's to give cities like Chicago and Detroit that are on the Great Lakes access to the ocean, so that way they could trade with Europe mainly. And so that's what allowed cities like Chicago to grow so much and have so much manufacturing, as well as Detroit. You need to know what landforms Canada and the United States share. You already know they share the Great Plains, they share the Rocky Mountains, and also the Great Lakes as well. And a few other things that Canada and the United States have in common, which you need to know, is that we were both British colonies beforehand. Sorry. We share similar natural resources for the most part, and other geographical features like I just mentioned, like the Rocky Mountains. And obviously we border each other, so right next to each other. Alright, going back to Unit 1, you need to know what GIS is, Geographic Information Systems, and that's basically a series of satellites in space that collect data about the Earth, and we can use that to see the ground itself and what's going on down there. And so we can use it during like a disaster or something of that sort to look in and see where we could try to get help, where we could maybe get our troops in there if we need support, things like that. Sorry, my allergies are all acting up. You know why Canadians live near the border? Live near the border because it's warmer. You got better soil for farming, transportation, the railroad system's all along there because it's hard to put that on permafrost. The ethnic group in Canada that tries to assert itself the most and get freedom is the French. The French in Quebec have tried to get their freedom and be their own country. Make sure you know how population pyramids work. There'll be another one of those on here. And again, another one on the different levels of economic activity. All right, NAFTA, you need to know what NAFTA is, North American Free Trade Agreement, that was signed by Bill Clinton back in the 90s, and that allowed free trade between Canada, U.S., and Mexico. And so what that did is it got rid of tariffs or taxes on imported goods, so that way goods can freely go between the countries without extra cost. All right, after 9/11, besides going to war and attacking Iraq and Afghanistan, Bush created a new Department of Homeland Security, to help keep our country safe from terrorism. And another question about democracy, which you should already know. Just make sure you know characteristics of democracy. Also, make sure you know the correlation between birth rates and the wealth of a country. So wealthier countries like Canada, the United States, have lower birth rates. Remember, birth rates is how, on average, how many kids a woman will have during childbearing years, which is generally from about age 15, 16 years old up until about 45. So here in the U.S., it's 2.1. Actually, well, more like 2. But point is that it's going to be lower because kids are more expensive in the developed world to have than they are in the developing world, where they're actually bring in money instead of cost money. Alright, now why the U.S. was considered a melting pot. Now, people kind of debate this one more so now, but used to it was more of a melting pot because the immigrants that came 100 years ago from Europe, they would try to assimilate very quickly to American culture. They would get rid of their language, stop speaking it. They wouldn't teach their kids their native language. They would get rid of a lot of their cultural things they would do, dress, things like that, because they wanted to fit in immediately and become American. And so that's how it became a melting pot, because even though they were assimilating, parts of their culture are still going to obviously evolve and be here and intermix and intertwine with other cultures, and that's how you get the unique food that we have and things of that sort. I gotta go fast because I'm running low on time. Trade deficit. Trade deficit, that has to do with, like, if the United States is trading with England, for example, and the U.S. is buying more goods from England than it's selling to England, it's going to have a trade deficit, meaning that we're losing money. So you have to make sure you don't import more than you export. You want to make sure that you export more than you import, so that way you make money. And when I say export more than you import, I'm talking about the price, as far as how much money is going in and out, and not necessarily that you want to export more goods. It's just the value of those goods needs to be more than the value of the goods you import. You know that we shifted from manufacturing to the service industry in our economy starting really in the 1970s up until now, and that's why places like Detroit have kind of run dry, because manufacturing is not as big of a deal anymore. You need to know why these certain cities, like what they have in common, like San Diego, LA, San Fran, Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. They're all along the West Coast. They're all big port cities that trade with Asia, mainly, of course, China, Japan, and South Korea, and that's what's made them huge cities on that side of the country. And you remember how humans came across to the Americas thousands of years ago, and that was across the land bridge called Beringia, which went across the Bering Strait. So it was a land bridge going across the Bering Strait from Asia over to the Americas. Alright, some things the U.S. doesn't have in common, and does. We do have in common that we both have multi-ethnic populations, so we're culturally diverse. But our population sizes are vastly different. Canada has around 31 million, and we have 313 million. The United States obviously is much more powerful internationally. We're a superpower. Canada's not. And our economy is much larger. They have a strong economy for their size, but our economy obviously produces quite a bit more. It's about 14 times larger. So anyways, that's it. I'm just about out of time because I'm pretty sure YouTube has a 15-minute limit. So come in and tutoring if you have any questions, and I'll see you all tomorrow.